All right, welcome into episode 5 of the Three-Man Booth, episode 2 in this current formation of the name. It really became a new era 2 weeks ago when we adopted the Three-Man Booth name. I'm joined in the booth by Mike Couzens and Ted Emrich. Kind of corny to say that I'm joined in the booth, but whatever. I guess we'll roll with it. Guys, good day.
Greetings, salutations.
It is always a good day. And by the way, shout out to John Vicari, who I believe was the one who suggested Three-Man Booth. We need to give proper credit.
Shout out to John. I love a good John.
The Royal Check will be coming shortly.
Yes. Shout out to Mike rocking the WNBA t-shirt here today.
Yes.
Yeah, I just got my Liberty shirt and my Seattle Storm shirt in the mail. So I'm trying to go old school, new school WNBA, where you've got Sue Bird, who is a major vet in the league, and then Sabrina Ionescu on the Liberty, who everybody's really excited about the start of her career. So
Had her first 30-piece.
Now that you are wearing a WNBA shirt, I think Richard Deitch is going to give us some love. He's a big WNBA guy, right?
Well, that's going to be even better for the royalty checks that are coming. So
yeah. So John, you're rolling bit. Ted, what shirt are you? I'm just glad Ted's wearing a shirt today. What are you wearing?
Yes, I usually go shirt off for Three-Man Booth, and so I decided to put one on today. I went with the Foo Fighters look.
Oh.
So,
yeah.
Yes.
At first, I thought, before I knew that was Foo Fighters, I thought it just said POD and that you were really going.
Yes, my other favorite band, of course.
Yeah, you always struck me as a POD guy.
That's right.
Southtown,
baby, Southtown.
We do like to help the youth of the nation on this podcast, so it's only fitting.
Not the euthanasia, which at one point a younger Jared Sandler thought that's what they were saying. Or before I even knew what euthanasia was, like the medical version, I actually think I thought that song was saluting the youth in the continent of Asia.
We are euthanasia. God, we are already wheels off.
They were going for a big fan base. It's a very populous continent.
Yeah.
So
yes.
It was a capitalist move on their part.
They asked David Stern about global expansion of a brand, and he's like, go to Asia because that's worked out really well for us. So, although in 2020, probably don't want to have much of a spotlight on the NBA in Asia after what took place over the last 12 months. So we will segue to commercial breaks, and we're not going to take a commercial break, but we have a list, full disclosure to people. We have a list of topics that at some point we're going to get to, and as we share every week, if you've got something you'd like us to discuss, let us know, because if you want us to discuss it, chances are other people would find it interesting too. I randomly added this thinking that you guys would feel like it was kind of silly, but I always find that during commercial breaks, I'm never sure the best way to use my time. And I know that checking my texts and looking at the score of another game, like when I'm calling a G League game and it's a Saturday and there's college football going on, I'm pretty sure that checking the Saturday night college football scores during a commercial break, probably not the best use of my time. But I'll get into why maybe it isn't a horrible idea. I don't know, but I've never actually had this conversation, and you guys did not Dikembe Mutombo this topic. So I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say about this, because a lot of the things that we talk about, we've in some way, shape, or form discussed casually over the years. I don't think I've ever talked to you guys about this. So, Mike, Ted is totally outdoing us. Not only is he wearing a shirt today, but I'm told he's got a presentation on this topic. So we're going to turn it over to Ted.
Yeah, I want to see this.
Yes, it's not a full presentation. It's not. I'm not going to show or screen a commercial break in action. But I love this topic because I remember very early on with the first few games I did out of college, I would just zone out during commercial breaks. And I think that's easy to do. And this is mainly on radio. And when you're trying to keep up with the action, just trying to adjust to the pace of the game as a kid still, essentially, you feel like you have to catch your breath and reset. But then all of a sudden you're back and you haven't cobble together any thoughts? Where are you going next? How do you reset as you welcome the audience back? Important things to hit on. And that's it. You pick this up as you go. You learn that that's not how to best use a commercial break. And especially now, social media, I very rarely check Twitter or whatever during a game, maybe at halftime. I marvel at those who can, and there are many announcers who can. They stay engaged, and in fact, they even tweet during commercial breaks, and they still operate at such a high level. But for me, I wanted to break it down, TV and radio. With TV, I'm always thinking about what's next. And of course, in that scenario, you have a producer in your ear, and your analyst is right next to you, and you can hear, okay, we're going to have a promo coming out of the break. Big Monday coming up, and it's, Duke and Florida State, followed by Texas and Baylor, whatever it might be. How can I then bounce off that and engage the analyst for a little bit? As we know, on TV, conversation, flow, you always want to be able to chain everything together. And if I can get my analyst thoughts on maybe a team or a player that's included in that promo, great. Another thing might be, okay, what graphic are we going to do coming out of break? And Mike, you certainly know this. You were on the ESPN high school basketball crew before I was. That crew is a tight one with Paul Biancardi, and for many years, Lori Mancini, the producer, and Neil Gallo, the director. Like, you have that comfort level with that crew who you're with from week to week, and you can bounce ideas off each other, not just in that space during the commercial break, but obviously the week leading up to it, about graphics, about pre-tape, about pictures, whatever it may be, video. And so there it is truly a collaboration. Where are we going next? And maybe Paul has hey, let's hit on this. Let's hit on, no surprise, he wants to hit on the rankings. Let's hit on the top 10 players in the class of 2020. And we happen to have one in the game tonight. Great. And it leads to more conversation as the game continues. The other side of it is on radio. And there is where I wanted to share my screen and let everyone know where I'm looking on my board for ideas. Because with radio, of course, listen, you are the eyes of the listener, and you have to be able to describe the action with hopefully pinpoint accuracy, and there's not as much room for conversation as there is in television. So if I'm going to share my screen here and just show you a sample, can you guys see it first of all?
Yes.
A football board? Okay. So I'm looking over here on the left side where I have mainly team notes. And this is from the Cowboys game against the Saints that I did last September on a Sunday night. And this is probably something right here where I'm underlining with my mouse. We probably hit on this in the open. But it's never a bad idea to come back to it. And maybe, some commercial break in the third quarter, just to reset, always play the hits, hammer home what's at stake, what makes this game special. I mean, obviously, it's the Cowboys and the Saints in New Orleans on a Sunday night. It's prime time. But beyond that, giving the game context, at the time, the Cowboys were 3-0. Their first 3-0 start since 2008. Haven't been 4-0. Since 2007. They didn't get there, of course, a low-scoring game, and the Saints beat them. I'm looking at player notes. I'm looking at right here to the side of the Dak Prescott box. Little things that I might not have mentioned during the game yet, because, again, you're so focused on radio in describing the action and setting the formation and all of that, and crossing the T's, dotting the I's, all of that important stuff that on radio. Little things, little nuggets that I can pepper in during the action, that he is the second highest rated passer in the NFL behind only Patrick Mahomes. It's just little things like that. And you hope that as you continue to go back to your board during the break, because certainly you don't have time over the course of the play. You can't be caught, as we've talked about last week, can't be caught with your eyes down because you're going to miss something. And we've all been there. You're going to miss something, and hopefully it's not too critical. You hope that stays in your brain. Hey, there's a timeout. You're not taking the break this time. And maybe then you can have a little bit of a conversation. Like I just remember this quote that week that stuck out to me as I put in here, versus New Orleans, just little things about the matchup. The DeMarcus Lawrence of the Cowboys is always a great quote. And one thing that made headlines that week was, in New Orleans, you always hear who dat, right? Who dat going to beat them Saints? And he said, we're going to show that we dat. And it's a colorful quote, a guy who's a great quote, and something that perhaps you can hit on at some point when the time is right during the game. So I'm always trying to go back to the team notes, player notes here and there that maybe I've missed. Just that hasn't come up yet. Mike, you talked about that last week. It hasn't come up yet. And, maybe now is the time to fit that in. Maybe it's not. But at the very least, you're reviewing the prep, that all the work you put in. That's how I try to best utilize that time.
So
See the transition there with the screen share, Ted. Way to go.
I'm similar to what you do in terms of scanning over my chart to make sure I didn't miss anything. But I also I've talked about this before, how I do a couple different documents that that I will review during the game and especially during breaks. So this first one that I do, and I type this up usually the night before, or if I have a Saturday night game, which I did a lot the last couple of years in the Mountain West, I'll go through, and the ESPN research department puts out a phenomenal volume of notes. And I also use them from the Associated Press, from, wherever I can find information. So this is going through the biggest games of the day that I think that we might have come up, in discussion during our game, or a lot of times too, late at night, doing those Mountain and Pacific time zone games, we'll get cut-ins from the studio of updates of what's going on elsewhere in the country. So let's say it's Matt Berry in the studio and he's going to hit 3 games, but I don't know what the last of those 3 games is going to be. So forget all the times that are listed on here, but he might start with Oklahoma and Kansas. So in my head, I'm looking at these notes and getting prepared to respond to what Matt said about OU and KU. Then I've got Michigan State, Ohio State. And then, the other late game would have been that night, Washington at Stanford, which is where that update might finish. So he could say, hey, it's the Huskies up by 7 over the Cardinal right now. Mike, back to you. And I could say, hey, yeah, Washington's looking for their first win at Stanford since 2007, because that just makes us all sound like we're all working together and very much on the same page with the production. So I probably put an hour's worth of time putting all of this stuff together. If I only use it for 30 seconds on the air, it's still worthwhile to me because, one, it helps me keep a good eye of what's going on around the country. And 2, I think it makes for a better response for talking to your analyst or talking to the studio host when you're coming back out of an update. The other thing I wanted to share is this is a document that is put together by our producer every week. And are you seeing
production list?
Okay, good. So what you see on there is the things that are on the air before us. So if we get a toss from a different show, I'll know it was coming from UFC, and we can make reference to that quickly if we need to. Where we're going afterward, which is going to be just a show of scores. And then here's all the edits. And when we talk about edits, these are the video packages that can be rolled in between plays, coming out of a break, during a timeout. So all these different things that, when the producer is running a show in the control room or in the truck, they're not just worried about what's happening on the air, but they're worried about making sure that their entire truck is operating smoothly. So sometimes things get missed by one or the other of us. So I'll reference this during breaks to say, hey, there was just a huge play to put Colorado State up. It's late in the game. Let's go back to when they beat San Diego State in 2003 and just revisit that. because it might be the only time in the game where we could get that in. These are other elements that we have to get in during the game. That's not really something that falls on my shoulders sometimes to read something from that, but not necessarily when to get them in. All of our sponsored elements too, all of our promos. So I'll make notes for all the promos as well. Talk about what the NFL games are going to be tomorrow that are going to get featured on NFL Countdown, about a feature you might see on SportsCenter later that night. And then these additional storylines are a collaborative effort between the producer, director, graphics, myself, of all the things that we want to talk about during the game. And so I'll revisit this thing during the game to think to myself, all right, is there anything here that could make the game better that I haven't brought up yet? Now, part of it is you don't want to force all that information in, but you also don't want to spend your whole week preparing for the game and then leave out something that might be a crucial piece of information. The other two things that I have for what I do during breaks are, depending on, what time of day it is or what type of day it is in the sporting world, ESPN's Stats and Information group runs a Slack channel for specific sports. So college football has one, college basketball has one. So that's a great place to go, especially if you're doing a primetime game in that 7 Eastern window, 7:30 timeframe, where the best games are going to be going on. You can look around on there and see not only what the scores are, but what some of the big statistical nuggets are, and you can drop those into your broadcast too. So again, whenever we sound smart on the air, it's usually a product of something somebody else told us, and especially in that case. And the last thing that I'll do, and Ted, I'm sure that there's a good number of people on either side of this aisle, is I do look at social media if I have time, if only because, and I hope that I one day don't have this, but I still do, because, we're parachuting in for a national perspective on a team for 1 week, and then we're going to see 2 totally different teams the next week. So I don't want to have mistakenly said that, Delino DeShields' mom is Diamond DeShields when Diamond is actually his sister, just to tie it into the Rangers there. To have said something totally egregious and stupid, that if someone from the local fan base is going to say, hey, you messed this up, I want to know that so that I can either correct it or not make that same mistake again in the future. So I look at that as like a safety net almost, to keep myself in check and make sure that, I haven't done anything horrifically dumb.
Well, go ahead, Ted.
I was going to say, I guess I would hope that, listen, and we know it because we've been in that situation. Listen, a producer in the truck, anybody in the truck, is so busy because they're being pulled in multiple directions. You would hope that you don't make that mistake in the first place. And Mike, I can't imagine a situation where you have. But I would hope that it wouldn't fall on somebody on social media to yell at you to correct that. But
well, people are always happy to yell at me whether I've made it.
Oh, I've been there too. Trust me, I know. Don't you love it? When you get the tweets from each fan base saying that you're a homer for the other school, that's when you know you're doing it right.
So just to bounce off the social media thing, I do in baseball, I have my computer up. And so I have TweetDeck up. And first of all, I definitely want to just pick as many fights as possible during the game and get into Twitter wars. I think that's what makes a broadcast great. No, but I do think in baseball, it's such a numbersy game. And sometimes there are things that go on that, when you're in the middle of the broadcast, maybe you can't get that information. So I have it on. I always try and see. I've got a feed that's specific to people who I know cover that particular team or those teams, just to see, hey, do they have anything of interest? Maybe, as much as I try to prepare as thoroughly as possible for the Rangers-Giants tomorrow, I might not know that Mauricio Dubon's next hit is his 500th career hit. And maybe I don't care. But at least there's a palette of information that could be out there. When I don't have, when I'm doing a basketball broadcast, a lot of times I can't have my computer up. I don't have room on the counter. And so I will pull out my phone, and it's tougher to organize it in that same way as I would with baseball. But I'll look to see mentions, if there's anything that egregiously I messed up, just to be aware of it. or just to see if there's any like big breaking news going on around the sports world that could be worth. I mean, heck, I had to call a G League basketball game the day Kobe died, and had I not been somewhat in tune with social media based on when it happened versus when tip-off was, I don't know that, we would have been, or I would have been organized for the game. I mean, that was such a big part of the conversation, and were we going to play, were we not going to play, and, communicating with the production team, because they're busting their tail getting ready for the broadcast. They might not have time to browse social media. So I do think it's valuable, not for the material side. I'm not checking IG to look at, who's posting what, but like from an actual beneficial side, I do. Now, I will say this is a big win for me during commercial breaks. I usually go on this website. It's called Google, and I type in Blake Lively, and I just look at Blake Lively. That's a big one for me.
You're notably absent from any of those photos.
Well, no, I don't. But I don't like to be in that.
Have you photoshopped yourself with Blake? Yeah, you have that, right? There it is. Yeah, there it is. Thank you.
There we are. No, so another thing on the, I think a couple things. One that we kind of covered, one we didn't. I do think it's healthy depending on the game and the day. If this is your 18th baseball game in 18 days, or maybe it's just a frenetic pace in basketball, I do think it's okay to spend part, if not all of the break, if you feel prepared, just like taking like a minute to get a drink of water and clear your head, catch your breath. Like I do think there's a balance, and everyone's different. Everyone operates differently, different gas tanks, but I do think it's okay as long as you feel prepared to do that. Now, in basketball, I'll always look over the stat sheet that oftentimes they bring us, or we have a monitor right in front of us. Not to get full memorization, just see if anything's standing out. Maybe I've noticed from the game that Team A is getting a ton of rebounds and Team B isn't. And sometimes it's tough to truly like absorb that information when it's back and forth. I'll just do like a one over, and sometimes I'll talk to my analyst, or almost all the time, and just like give them what are you thinking? And if I've worked with that person, they know what I'm talking about. What's on their mind? How can I set them up during that next stretch? What thoughts do they have that they're passionate about? Because I can drive the ship as best as I want, but if I can get them somewhere they're passionate about, then I think that makes the conversation better. So I'll always try and check in with them. And then you guys mentioned on the TV side, usually half of the break or some of the break, you're communicating back with the truck on what's next, what production elements, what reads, all of that stuff. So I definitely try to take 5 or 10 seconds just to take a break, but it is, as you guys mentioned, a great time. And I don't, anything I could share, I mean, you guys have covered it. But, going over the storylines, because those are things that sometimes can get lost within the gameplay. Maybe some guy, this is a great opportunity if Joe Smith McGee, who you weren't expecting to get big minutes, has come in off the bench and hit a couple of threes to get a refresher on some of his nuggets. What's interesting about Joe Smith McGee? Because again, baseball, it's a little different. Baseball, the pace is slower. It allows for this. Basketball, it is so tough to, maybe during free throws, maybe to like look down and remind yourself of this or that, so the commercial break for me is a big time to do that.
Jared, I'm glad you brought up communicating with your analyst too, because that's something I'm wanting to mention. Anytime I work with an analyst for the first time, that first break, I just want to check in with him or her and like, how are you feeling? Can I do anything better? Are you comfortable? Where do you want to go? Because again, especially that first time, and with ESPN, you work with so many different people over the course of the season, and that's a good thing. That helps you improve. Everybody's different, but I always want to check in with them very early on, that first time out, and see where they are.
I have a question. Is Joe Smith McGee a descendant of Joe Smith, the pitcher, or JaVale McGee, the basketball player?
No. Actually, Joe Smith, the basketball player that went to Maryland.
Oh, I thought it was Stephen McGee's
No,
younger
no, no,
brother.
no,
No?
no. Just he added McGee. McGee's his married name. He got married and he decided to take on his partner's wife. I'm not sure. And it's all okay, but he wanted to add McGee. So
What's his game like?
it's very similar to his relative Joe Smith. Not really going to stretch the floor. More of an old school, not old school, like a '90s game. He's going to play from like 18 feet and in. He'll probably be involved in some transaction in his career that gets the Minnesota Timberwolves in a whole lot of trouble because of a contract that was signed. I don't fully remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
But as a tribute to Joe Smith, the pitcher, he shoots the basketball from a submarine.
Yeah.
Very hard to get a shot off.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Any final thoughts on this before we say goodbye for today?
No, I'm getting the countdown in my ear that we're coming out of break. So.
Oh, we gotta go. So
4, 3.
If you're watching and maybe you have a specific question about any of this, you can always reach out to us on Twitter. Our Twitter handles are our names. So at Ted Emrich, at Mike Couzens, at Jared Sandler, or email, whatever. If you have our email, slide into the DMs. And maybe we'll bring it up in a future episode just to kind of tie up loose ends. And then again, in general, if you've got a topic you'd like us to discuss that you want us to add to the list, please, by all means, share it. Because like I said at the beginning, if you want to hear about it, chances are someone else does as well. But we appreciate this, the time and commercial breaks, not something talked about a ton, but I do think those minutes add up and can be valuable. Ted, Mike, let's go help out the youth in Asia.
Go Liberty.
See you
Go
guys.
Foo Fighters and POD.